My name is Hunter, 67 years old, and I never thought my own son would break my heart. After my wife passed, I moved in with Thomas and his family, bringing my savings and my hope. At first there were smiles, but they faded as his wife Amanda grew colder by the day. Then came that dinner when Thomas looked me in the eye and said, "You have no meaning in this house anymore." I felt my world collapse, but I kept silent. They had no idea what I was planning. Before I continue this story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like and subscribe button if you believe family should mean something more than convenience. Life has a way of taking unexpected turns. For 40 years, I worked my way up from apprentice to construction manager, building homes for families while nurturing my own. My wife Gloria and I raised our only son Thomas with everything we could provide. We were never wealthy, but our home was filled with love, laughter, and the kind of security I never had growing up. Gloria was my world for 45 wonderful years. When she was diagnosed with aggressive ovarian cancer, it felt like the ground disappeared beneath my feet. Those final 2 years were a blur of hospital visits, chemotherapy sessions, and nights spent holding her hand as she grew weaker. When she finally passed, I found myself alone in our family home of 30 years, surrounded by memories but with no one to share them. Thomas had moved to Oak Ridge, about 3 hours away, after college. He married Amanda shortly after, and they quickly had 2 beautiful children, my grandkids, Jacob and Lily. During Gloria's illness, Thomas visited when he could, but his job as a financial advisor kept him busy, and Amanda rarely made the trip with him. I understood. Life gets complicated with small children. 3 months after Gloria's funeral, Thomas called with what seemed like a blessing. "Dad," he said, "Amanda and I have been talking. That house is too big for you alone. Why don't you sell it and come live with us? We have plenty of space, and the kids would love having their grandfather around." The offer came at the perfect moment. The emptiness of the house had become unbearable. Every room echoed with Gloria's absence. Plus, the idea of being close to my grandchildren filled a void in my heart. Jacob was 10, a curious boy who loved building things just like I did at his age. Lily was 8, with her grandmother's gentle smile and love of gardening. The thought of watching them grow up gave me a sense of purpose again. Thomas and Amanda had purchased a large colonial-style house in a good neighborhood, but they had stretched their finances thin to afford it. When I mentioned selling my house and using some of the money to help them with their mortgage, Thomas protested at first, but eventually accepted. "Consider it an early inheritance," I told him. "Gloria would want the money to help the family." I contributed $200,000 toward their mortgage, keeping the rest for my retirement needs. The first few months were wonderful. I moved into their guest bedroom, which Amanda decorated nicely for me. I spent mornings helping Jacob with his science projects and afternoons gardening with Lily. I fixed things around the house, cooked dinner 3 times a week, and even drove the kids to their activities when both Thomas and Amanda were working. It felt good to be useful, to be part of a family again. Amanda seemed genuinely appreciative at first. She worked as a real estate agent and often had unpredictable hours showing houses. Having another adult in the home who could help with the children eased her stress considerably. "Hunter, I don't know what we did before you came," she said once after I had handled dinner and homework while she closed a big sale. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. Small comments about how I loaded the dishwasher. A sigh when I suggested weekend activities with the grandkids. The way she would rearrange the living room after I vacuumed it. At first, I dismissed these as normal adjustments to having another adult in the house. Every household has its rhythm, and I was still finding mine. Thomas remained warm but increasingly distant. His job demanded more of his time, often keeping him at the office until late. When he was home, Amanda monopolized his attention with household decisions or social plans that somehow never included me. I told myself this was natural. They were a young couple with their own lives. My financial contribution to their home had been substantial. I had sold my house for $480,000 after owning it for 30 years. The $200,000 I gave Thomas represented decades of mortgage payments, maintenance, and the sweat equity Gloria and I had poured into our home. I never expected repayment. That money was meant to secure my place in the family, to ease their burden and show my commitment to our new living arrangement. Little did I know that as the months passed, my role in their home would change from welcomed father and grandfather to unwanted burden. The signs were there, but in my desire to believe in this new chapter, I failed to read them clearly. Change came slowly, like a shifting tide that you only notice when the water is already at your ankles. 6 months after moving in, I began to notice more troubling changes in our household dynamic. Amanda's occasional sighs had evolved into direct criticism. One evening, I prepared my specialty lasagna, a recipe Gloria had perfected over decades and taught me during her final months. It was my way of keeping her memory alive and sharing something of her with the grandchildren. "The sauce is too acidic," Amanda commented after one bite, "and there is way too much cheese. It is not healthy for the children." She scraped her portion into the garbage and made sandwiches instead. Thomas said nothing, focusing intently on his plate while the children watched in confusion. My morning routine of making coffee for everyone gradually became a point of contention. "You always make it too strong," Amanda would complain. Then, "Why do you have to be in the kitchen so early? Your shuffling around wakes everyone up." Eventually, she bought a programmable coffee maker and pointedly told me not to touch it. The space I occupied in their home seemed to shrink daily. Initially welcomed in the family room during evenings, I began to notice Amanda whispering to Thomas whenever I joined them. Shortly after, Thomas would suggest I might enjoy watching my own shows on the small television in my bedroom. "We know you are not interested in these reality programs, Dad," he would say, though we had never discussed my television preferences. My grandchildren, who had been so excited to have me there initially, were subtly guided away from spending time with me. When Jacob asked for my help with his science fair project, a model bridge that required the carpentry skills I had developed over decades, Amanda intervened. "Your teacher wants you to do it yourself, honey," she said, though I had only offered guidance, not to build it for him. Later, I overheard her telling him, "Grandpa is old and gets tired easily. It is better if you do not bother him so much." Lily, who had spent countless happy hours gardening with me, was suddenly enrolled in after-school activities that consumed the time we had previously spent together. When she did have free time, Amanda would redirect her. "Grandpa is resting," she would say, even when I was sitting alert in the living room, hoping for their company. The situation reached a painful point on my 68th birthday. Thomas had promised a special family dinner to celebrate. I spent the day looking forward to it, even picking up a small cake from the bakery to share. When dinner time arrived, Amanda served spicy seafood paella, despite knowing about my digestive issues that made spicy food and shellfish problematic since my gallbladder surgery years ago. "Oh, did I forget about your restrictions?" she said with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "There is bread in the pantry if you prefer." No alternative meal was offered. The birthday cake I had purchased remained in the refrigerator, unmentioned and unserved. When I attempted to address these issues calmly with Thomas in private, he became defensive. "Amanda works very hard to run this household," he said. "She has certain ways she likes things done. You need to be more flexible, Dad. This is their home, after all. Their home, not our home." The distinction was clear and cutting. Then came the day I returned from a doctor appointment to find my belongings had been moved. My room had originally been a spacious guest suite on the main floor, with its own bathroom. Now, my things were in the small bedroom upstairs, next to the noisy laundry room. My personal photos of Gloria and our life together, which had been displayed on the living room mantel, were boxed and placed on the bed. "We need the downstairs bedroom as a home office," Thomas explained when I questioned the move. "Amanda is expanding her real estate business. This makes more sense for everyone." Again, I had not been consulted or warned about the change. The final straw came when I overheard a conversation between Thomas and Amanda late one evening. I had gone downstairs for water, moving quietly due to the late hour. Their voices carried from the kitchen, where they sat with wine glasses and household bills spread between them. "We need to talk about the situation," Amanda said, her voice firm. "It is not working out as we planned. What would you suggest?" Thomas sounded tired, resigned. "He takes up space, requires attention, and changes our family dynamic. The children are getting confused about authority. Last week, Lily asked why Grandpa lets her have cookies before dinner when I do not. He contributed significantly to our mortgage," Thomas reminded her. "And in return, He has had free room and board for nearly a year, she countered. That money was essentially rent paid in advance, and he has gotten his value from it. Besides, your father has his Social Security and retirement savings. He could afford his own place. Their words stabbed at my heart. I had never considered my financial contribution as rent. It was meant as a gift, a way to secure my place in the family home permanently. To hear it dismissed so coldly was devastating. I retreated silently to my room, my water forgotten. That night, as I stared at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic thump of the dryer through the thin wall, I realized the painful truth. I had become an inconvenience in my son's life, an obstacle to his wife's vision of their family. The realization was bitter, but it forced me to see what I had been ignoring for months. I was not welcome. I was tolerated, and barely that. The following weeks brought more evidence of my diminishing place in the household. My suggestions were ignored. My offers to help were rejected. Meals were planned without consideration for my preferences or schedule. Family outings happened without invitation, or with last-minute notifications that made it impossible for me to join. I became a ghost in their home, present but unseen. The hurt ran deep, but beneath it, something else was beginning to grow. A quiet determination, a resolve that would soon be tested in ways none of us expected. After nearly 14 months living with Thomas and Amanda, I decided to make one final effort to reconnect with my family. Perhaps, I thought, I had misinterpreted the situation. Perhaps with a thoughtful gesture, we could reset our relationships and find a way forward together. I planned a special dinner, spending the day preparing foods that everyone loved while Thomas and Amanda were at work and the children at school. For Thomas, I made his favorite pot roast, slow-cooked the way Gloria had always prepared it. For Amanda, a kale and quinoa salad with cranberries and feta that I had once heard her praise at a restaurant. For Jacob, homemade macaroni and cheese with the 3 cheeses he preferred. For Lily, roasted chicken with applesauce, her comfort meal since she was a toddler. I even baked an apple pie from scratch, filling the house with the warm scents of cinnamon and nutmeg. I set the dining table with care, using the good dishes and cloth napkins. I placed a small vase of fresh flowers as a centerpiece, nothing extravagant but thoughtfully arranged. This meal represented hope, an offering of peace, and a reminder of the comfort that family can provide. When everyone arrived home, the children reacted with excitement. "Grandpa, did you make all this?" Jacob asked, his eyes wide at the spread. "You made my favorite chicken," Lily exclaimed, rushing to hug me. Their enthusiasm warmed my heart, but it was short-lived. Amanda entered the kitchen, her expression tightening as she surveyed my efforts. "What is all this?" she asked, her tone making the question sound like an accusation. "Just a family dinner," I replied. "I thought it would be nice for us to enjoy a meal together." Thomas appeared behind her, loosening his tie. His expression was unreadable as he took in the scene. "You went to a lot of trouble, Dad," he said, his voice neutral. "It was no trouble," I assured them. "Cooking for family is never trouble." Amanda's lips pressed into a thin line. "The children have homework," she said, "and I am not sure this fits with our nutrition plan for them." She turned to the children. "Jacob, Lily, wash up and get started on your assignments. You can have a small plate after your work is done." The children's faces fell, but they did not argue. They had learned, as had I, that contradicting Amanda rarely ended well. They trudged upstairs, casting longing glances at the food. "That was unnecessary," I said quietly after they had gone. "One special meal would not have harmed them." "Parenting decisions are not yours to make," Amanda replied sharply. "Thomas and I decide what is best for our children." Thomas sighed heavily and sat at the table. "Let us just have dinner, shall we?" We sat in uncomfortable silence. Amanda picked at her salad without comment or thanks. Thomas ate mechanically, his eyes on his plate. I tried to initiate conversation several times, asking about their day, commenting on the weather, mentioning an interesting article I had read. Each attempt was met with one word, answers or redirection. Finally, Thomas set down his fork and looked at me directly. "Dad, we need to talk." The seriousness in his tone made my stomach clench. I nodded, waiting. "This living arrangement," he began, glancing at Amanda, who gave him an encouraging nod. "It is not working out the way we expected." "I see," I said, though my heart was already beginning to race. "In what way?" "There have been adjustments for everyone," he continued, his voice taking on a rehearsed quality. but we feel that the current situation is causing more stress than benefit. If there are specific concerns, I offered, perhaps we could address them together. I am certainly willing to make accommodations. Amanda made a small, dismissive sound. Thomas shot her a glance before continuing. The issue is more fundamental. This household functions in a certain way, with established patterns and expectations. Your presence disrupts those patterns. I looked between them, trying to understand what was not being said. Are there specific things I do that cause problems? I can certainly change my habits. It is not about specific habits, Thomas said, his voice hardening slightly. It is about your place here. My place? I repeated, confused. Yes, Thomas said, and then with a coldness I had never heard from my son before, he delivered the blow. The truth is, you have no meaning in this house anymore. You are neither needed nor particularly wanted. The words hit me like physical force. I actually felt myself rock back in the chair. Next to him, Amanda's lips curved in a satisfied smile, quickly disguised as sympathy. Thomas, I began, my voice barely audible. It would be best for everyone if you found your own place, he continued, not meeting my eyes now. We can help you look for a nice senior apartment or retirement community. A retirement community? I echoed, still struggling to process the cruelty of his earlier statement. I am 68, not 88. I am in good health, fully independent. Nevertheless, Amanda interjected smoothly, we feel it would be more appropriate. You must be lonely here while we are all busy with our lives. A community of peers would provide you with companionship and activities suited to your age group. I sat in stunned silence, looking at my son, searching for any sign of the boy I had raised, the young man who had once looked up to me. His face remained impassive, though he still would not meet my gaze directly. From the stairs came a small sound. I turned to see Jacob and Lily standing there, their faces reflecting confusion and distress. They had heard everything. Lily's eyes were filling with tears, while Jacob looked between his parents and me with a troubled frown. Children, Amanda said sharply. I thought you were doing homework. Go back upstairs now. But Mom, Jacob began. Now, Thomas reinforced, and they retreated, Lily casting one tearful glance back at me. I stood up slowly, my appetite gone, my carefully prepared meal sitting cold and forgotten on the table. I understand, I said, though I did not. Not really, if you will excuse me. I walked to my small upstairs room with measured steps, determined to maintain dignity. Once inside, with the door closed, I sat on the edge of the bed and allowed the full impact of what had just happened to wash over me. My son had told me I was meaningless. My presence was unwanted. The family I had sacrificed for, the grandchildren I adored, the home I had helped finance, none of it was truly mine. That night, unable to sleep, I heard more discussion from downstairs. Their voices carried through the heating vent near my bed. The retirement community on Oakwood has openings, Amanda was saying. I showed a condo there last month. It is basic but functional. What about his contribution to this house? Thomas asked. Should we consider returning some of that money? Why? Amanda sounded genuinely surprised. He has lived here rent-free for over a year. Besides, we cannot afford to return that money right now. The market is slow, and my commissions have been down. I suppose you are right, Thomas conceded, and he does have his pension and Social Security. He should be fine financially. They were discussing my future, my finances, my life, as if I were a problem to be solved rather than a person with feelings and dignity. The casual dismissal of my significant financial contribution to their home stung particularly sharply. That money represented years of work, saving, and planning with Gloria. It had been given freely, out of love and the belief that I was securing my place in the family. As dawn broke, I had not slept, but something had solidified within me. The shock and hurt remained, but alongside them grew a determination. I would not beg for scraps of affection. I would not be relegated to a convenient corner of their lives until they decided even that was too much space for me to occupy. If I truly had no meaning in this house, then I would find meaning elsewhere. On my own terms, with my own plan. They thought they knew what would happen next. They were wrong. The morning after the confrontation, I rose early and left the house before anyone else was awake. I needed space to think, to process the hurt, and to consider my options rationally. The neighborhood park, with its walking paths and quiet benches, provided the perfect setting for contemplation. My first call was to Frank Johnson, my oldest friend, and a retired attorney. We had met in college and maintained our friendship through marriages, children, career changes, and now retirement. If anyone could offer sound advice in this situation, it would be Frank. They said, "What to you?" Frank's indignation was immediate and validating. "Hunter, that is outrageous, especially after your financial contribution to their home." "It happened," I said simply. "Now I need to decide what to do about it." Frank asked precise questions about the money I had given Thomas, the circumstances under which it was provided, and whether any documentation existed. $200,000 is not a casual gift, he pointed out. Was there any written agreement about your living arrangements or the purpose of the money? There had been no formal agreement, unfortunately. The arrangement had been made in good faith, family helping family. Thomas did send an email thanking me for the contribution and mentioning it would help secure my place in their home, I recalled. "Would that matter legally?" "It might," Frank said. "Forward me that email. I want to review it and consult with a colleague who specializes in elder law and financial matters." My next call was to Marjorie Wilson at Secure Futures Financial Services, who had handled Gloria's and my retirement planning for years. I explained the situation and asked for a complete review of my financial position. The meeting with Marjorie 2 days later brought both relief and clarity. "You are in better shape than you might think, Hunter," she said, reviewing my accounts. "Your pension is solid. Social Security provides a reliable monthly income. Your remaining savings from the house sale plus your IRA give you a substantial nest egg." "Enough to live independently?" I asked. "To start over?" "Absolutely," she confirmed. "And there is more. The money you contributed to Thomas's house purchase might be recoverable, depending on the circumstances and documentation. It could be considered a loan rather than a gift, if that was the implied understanding." This revelation was unexpected, but empowering. I had not considered reclaiming that money, viewing it as an investment in family harmony. Now that the harmony was shattered, perhaps the investment terms could be reconsidered. With Frank's legal insights and Marjorie's financial assessment, I began to formulate a comprehensive plan. I would need housing, a purpose beyond just existing, a social network, and a way to maintain relationships with my grandchildren despite the rift with their parents. The housing search began immediately. I was not interested in the retirement community Amanda had mentioned, which I knew to be a depressing complex with small units and few amenities. Instead, I researched vibrant adult communities and apartment buildings in neighborhoods with character and convenience. Riverside Meadows caught my attention immediately. Located 15 minutes from Thomas's house, it offered independent living apartments for adults 55 and older, with amenities including a fitness center, community garden, woodworking shop, and regular social events. Close enough to remain in my grandchildren's lives, but far enough to establish my independence. During a tour of the facility, I met several residents who quickly dispelled the stereotype of passive, disengaged seniors. There was Gerald, 74, who ran a part-time accounting service from his apartment. Maria, 66, taught piano to neighborhood children in the community music room. Robert and James, a couple in their 70s, organized weekly hiking excursions to nearby nature preserves. These active, engaged people reinforced what I already knew. Retirement did not mean irrelevance. It could be a time of reinvention and purpose. Speaking with Gerald sparked an idea. My 4 decades in construction management had provided me with knowledge that many homeowners lacked. What if I offered consulting services to people planning renovations or dealing with contractors? I could help them understand bids, identify potential issues, and avoid common and costly mistakes. The concept energized me. I spent evenings researching small business formation, creating a simple website, and designing business cards. Hunter's Construction Consulting. Expert guidance for your renovation project became not just a business name, but a statement of continued relevance and value. Reconnecting with former colleagues provided both emotional support and potential business referrals. Lunch with Mike Rivera, who still worked for my former company, turned into an impromptu strategy session. The number of homeowners who get fleeced by unscrupulous contractors is staggering, he confirmed. Your knowledge could save people thousands of dollars and months of headaches. While rebuilding my professional identity, I also focused on strengthening social connections. I joined a weekly coffee group at the local library, attended community events, and volunteered at the neighborhood tool lending library, where my expertise was immediately valued. Each interaction reinforced that I had much to offer and receive from meaningful community engagement. The most complex aspect of my plan involved the legal and financial implications of separating from Thomas's household. Frank arranged a consultation with Patricia Sanderson, an elder law specialist, who reviewed my situation with careful attention. The email from Thomas acknowledging your financial contribution and its purpose creates an implied contract, Patricia explained. Combined with the circumstances, there is a strong case that the money was provided with the understanding that you would have a permanent home with them. Their unilateral decision to end that arrangement could be grounds for recovering those funds. I do not want to create more conflict, I said, though the validation of my position was reassuring, but that money represents years of work and sacrifice. Consider this, Patricia suggested. Presenting the legal reality might actually result in a more amicable resolution. Sometimes people need to understand the consequences of their actions before they are willing to negotiate in good faith. With her guidance, we drafted a clear, non-confrontational letter outlining the facts, my contribution to their home, the implied agreement regarding my living situation, and the options for resolving the matter. The letter would be presented only if necessary, as a last resort. As my plan took shape, I maintained a calm, cordial demeanor in Thomas's house. I continued my routines, spoke politely when addressed, and gave no indication of my intensive planning. The coolness from Thomas and Amanda persisted, as did their not-so-subtle hints about retirement communities and downsizing. There is a nice open house at Oakwood Seniors next weekend, Amanda mentioned over breakfast one morning. I could take you by if you like. Thank you, but I have plans that day, I replied pleasantly, not specifying that those plans involved finalizing the lease on my Riverside Meadows apartment. In quiet moments with Jacob and Lily, I assured them of my continued love and presence in their lives. Grandparents and grandchildren have a special bond, I told them. No matter where I live, that will never change. One evening, about 3 weeks after the confrontation, I received an unexpected call from Frank. I have news, he said. Remember that colleague who specializes in elder law? She consulted with a real estate attorney about your situation. They both agree you have a strong case for recovering the money you contributed to Thomas's house purchase. How would that work practically? I asked. If Thomas and Amanda cannot repay the amount, which seems likely given what you have mentioned about their financial situation, they might need to refinance their mortgage or potentially even sell the house to satisfy the debt. The implications were significant. I had no desire to force my son's family from their home, but the potential leverage gave me confidence that my rights and dignity could be protected. The money itself had become symbolic, representing not just financial value but respect for my contributions and personhood. By the 6-week mark, my plan was fully developed. I had secured an apartment at Riverside Meadows, established my consulting business with several potential clients already lined up, built a growing social network, and prepared all necessary legal and financial documentation. I had quietly moved many of my most treasured possessions to a small storage unit, including photos of Gloria, family heirlooms, and personal items I could not bear to lose if the situation deteriorated further. The timeline was set. In exactly 2 weeks, I would announce my decision and begin my new chapter. The thought brought both anxiety and exhilaration. At 68 years old, I was starting over, not from weakness or defeat, but from a position of strength and self-determination. The son who declared me meaningless would soon discover that meaning is not bestowed by others. It is created by oneself, through action, purpose, and dignity. Implementing my plan while maintaining normalcy in the household required careful timing and discretion. I established a routine of leaving the house for several hours each day, ostensibly for walks, errands, or visits to the library. These outings provided cover for my actual activities, furnishing my new apartment, setting up my consulting business, and building my independent life piece by piece. My first client came through Frank's network. Martha Dennison, a recently widowed 62-year-old, was planning to renovate her kitchen but felt overwhelmed by contractor bids and technical terminology. I just do not know what is reasonable and what is excessive, she explained during our first consultation at a local coffee shop. My husband handled all these things before he passed. We reviewed the 3 estimates she had received, and I immediately identified concerning discrepancies. One contractor had significantly underestimated labor costs, a common tactic to secure the job before adding charges later. Another had specified unnecessarily expensive materials. The third seemed fair in pricing but had omitted crucial details about the electrical work required. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Martha said, relieved to have my insights. "How would I have known any of this on my own?" After our 2-hour consultation, for which I charged a modest fee, Martha left with clear recommendations and the confidence to move forward. She also promised to refer my services to her friends, many of whom were in similar situations, managing homes alone for the first time after decades of marriage. Word spread quickly. By the end of my second week in business, I had 5 consultations scheduled and 2 ongoing projects where I was serving as the homeowner's advocate during their renovations. The work was fulfilling, utilizing my expertise while truly helping people avoid costly mistakes. My apartment at Riverside Meadows took shape with each visit. I purchased only what I needed, quality items chosen with care rather than the accumulation of decades. The space felt fresh and purposeful, a physical manifestation of my new beginning. The community proved even more welcoming than anticipated. Before even moving in officially, I had been invited to join the resident garden committee and a weekly poker game. The satisfaction of creating my new life contrasted sharply with the continued deterioration of my situation in Thomas's home. Amanda's comments grew increasingly pointed, often delivered with a thin veneer of concern. "I noticed a brochure for Golden Sunset Retirement Village in the mail today," she mentioned one evening. "The assisted living options look quite comfortable. Would you like me to schedule a tour?" "No, thank you," I replied calmly. "I am capable of making my own housing arrangements when the time comes." Her eyes narrowed slightly at my response. I had previously been more passive, deflecting rather than declining. This small assertion of independence clearly surprised her. Thomas remained mostly distant, working late and engaging minimally when at home. On the rare occasions we found ourselves alone, there was an awkwardness between us, a strained silence where conversation used to flow easily. I felt his discomfort, and perhaps a hint of shame, but he made no effort to bridge the growing divide. The children provided the only warmth in the household. Despite Amanda's efforts to limit our interaction, Jacob and Lily sought me out whenever possible. Jacob would bring his science homework to my room, ostensibly for help, but often just for company. Lily would ask me to read to her before bedtime, a tradition from my early days in the house that had somehow survived. During these precious moments, I was careful not to burden them with adult concerns or speak negatively about their parents. These children were innocent in the conflict, and preserving their security and happiness remained paramount to me. "Grandpa," Jacob asked one afternoon as we worked on his astronomy project, "are you sad living here now?" The directness of his question caught me off guard. "Why do you ask that, buddy? You seem quiet. And Mom and Dad talk differently to you than before." His perceptiveness reminded me of Thomas as a child, always observant of emotional undercurrents. "Families go through changes sometimes," I said carefully. "The important thing is that I love you and Lily very much, and that will never change." He nodded, seemingly satisfied with my answer for the moment. "I love you too, Grandpa." As my departure date approached, I documented every aspect of my living situation, partly on Frank's legal advice and partly for my own record. I noted instances where I was excluded from family activities, conversations about my removal from the house, and the gradual restrictions placed on my interaction with the children. This documentation served a practical purpose, but also helped me process events objectively, separating emotional reaction from factual reality. I also ensured all my important documents were in order. I updated my will, organized my financial records, and gathered all necessary identification and insurance information. Whatever happened next, I would be prepared. The most challenging part of this period was maintaining my composure while witnessing the dissolution of what I had believed was an unbreakable family bond. Each small slight, each dismissive comment, each exclusion chipped away at the foundation of trust and love I had spent decades building. The pain was real and deep, but I channeled it into determined action rather than bitterness. One particularly difficult evening occurred during a dinner party Amanda and Thomas hosted for his colleagues. I was not invited to join the gathering, despite being a resident of the house. Amanda asked if I would eat in my room to allow enough space at the dining table. As laughter and conversation flowed from downstairs, I sat alone with a hastily prepared plate, feeling the full weight of my isolation within what was supposed to be my home. That night, I finalized the last details of my plan. My apartment was ready. My business had launched successfully. My social connections were established and growing. The legal documentation regarding my financial contribution to Thomas's house was prepared. I was ready to reclaim my independence and dignity. 2 days before my planned announcement, an unexpected development occurred. While Thomas and Amanda were at work and the children at school, I received a call from the property manager at Riverside Meadows. "Mr. Bennett, I have good news," she said. "The corner unit you admired has become available due to a last-minute change in another resident's plans. Since you are already approved, you could move in immediately rather than waiting for your originally assigned apartment next week." The corner unit was significantly nicer, with more natural light and a small balcony overlooking the community garden. The accelerated timeline would require adjusting my plans, but the opportunity was too good to pass up. "I will take it," I decided. "I can begin moving in tomorrow." That evening, as I packed the last of my belongings, I heard a soft knock at my door. It was Lily, clutching her favorite storybook. "Grandpa, will you read to me?" she asked, her eyes hopeful. We settled on the edge of my bed, and I read the familiar tale of a lost duckling finding its true family. As I closed the book, Lily looked up at me with serious eyes. "Mom said you might be going away soon," she said. "Is that true?" I hesitated, not wanting to reveal my plans before speaking with her parents, but unwilling to lie to her. "I will be living in a different house soon," I acknowledged. "But I will still see you and Jacob very often." "Promise?" she asked, her small hand gripping mine. "I promise," I assured her, and meant it with all my heart. The next day, while the house was empty, I moved the last of my essential belongings to my new apartment. The process was bittersweet, closing one chapter while opening another. As I arranged my few possessions in the bright, clean space of my new home, I felt a growing sense of peace. This place was mine, earned through my own efforts and chosen by my own will. When I returned to Thomas's house that evening, I knew that tomorrow would bring the conversation that would change everything. The plan was in place. The pieces were positioned. After months of silent action, it was time for revelation. The morning I chose to reveal my plan dawned clear and bright, a fitting backdrop for a day of truth and new beginnings. I had slept peacefully in what would be my last night in Thomas's house, secure in my preparations and resolved in my purpose. I rose early and prepared a simple breakfast, setting the table for 4 as Thomas and Amanda typically slept later than the children on Saturdays. Jacob and Lily joined me first, and we shared pancakes and conversation about their plans for the weekend. "Will you take us to the park later, Grandpa?" Lily asked, syrup dripping from her fork. "Let us see what the day brings," I replied, not wanting to make promises I might not be able to keep. Thomas and Amanda appeared around 9, both looking surprised to find breakfast waiting. They hesitated before joining us at the table, exchanging glances that suggested they had not expected this domestic scene. "I thought we could all have breakfast together this morning," I said pleasantly. "I have something to discuss with everyone." Amanda tensed visibly, while Thomas busied himself with pouring coffee. The children continued eating, oblivious to the undercurrent of tension. "Jacob, Lily," I began, "would you mind giving the adults a few minutes to talk? Maybe you could get started on your weekend homework, and we can all do something fun afterward." They reluctantly left the table, Lily casting curious glances over her shoulder as they headed upstairs. When we were alone, I folded my hands calmly on the table and looked directly at my son and his wife. "I want to thank you both for your hospitality over the past 16 months, I said. "But today, I will be moving out." The statement hung in the air for a moment before registering. Amanda recovered first, a smile spreading across her face, barely disguised as concern. "Oh, Hunter, have you found a retirement community that suits you? That is wonderful news. We are happy for you." "Not exactly," I replied. "I have leased an apartment at Riverside Meadows. I moved most of my belongings there yesterday, and I will complete the move today." Thomas frowned. "Riverside Meadows? Isn't that the new luxury adult community near Westfield?" "Those units are expensive." "Yes, they are," I agreed. "Fortunately, I can afford it." "I am not sure that is the wisest use of your retirement savings," Thomas said, slipping into the patronizing tone he had recently adopted when discussing my finances. "You should be conserving your resources at this stage of life. My financial situation is quite secure," I assured him. In fact, that brings me to the second part of what I wanted to discuss. I reached into my pocket and withdrew an envelope, placing it on the table between us. This contains documentation regarding the $200,000 I contributed to the purchase of this house. Thomas stared at the envelope without touching it. Amanda's smile faltered. "As you know," I continued, "that money was provided with the understanding that it would secure my place in the family home. Since that arrangement has been terminated, not by my choice, but by your statement that I have no meaning in this house anymore, the financial terms must also be revisited." "What exactly are you saying, Dad?" Thomas asked, his voice tight. "I am saying that the money was not a gift but a conditional investment predicated on our living arrangement. With that condition broken, the investment must be returned." Amanda's face flushed with anger. "That is ridiculous. You cannot just demand money back after all this time. We have given you free room and board for over a year." "Actually, he can," came a voice from the doorway. We all turned to see Frank standing there, briefcase in hand. I had texted him when breakfast began, timing his arrival for this moment. "This is Frank Johnson," I introduced him. "My attorney." "Your attorney?" Thomas repeated, looking bewildered. "Dad, why would you need an attorney for a family matter?" "Because this ceased to be merely a family matter when you decided I was unwelcome in your home," I replied, keeping my voice level. "Frank, please explain the legal position." Frank set his briefcase on the table and extracted several documents. "Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, I have reviewed the circumstances surrounding Mr. Hunter Bennett's financial contribution to your home purchase. Based on the email acknowledgement from Thomas, the implied contract is clear. The money was provided specifically to secure Mr. Bennett's place in the family home. The unilateral termination of that arrangement constitutes a breach of contract." "This is absurd," Amanda sputtered. "We cannot just come up with $200,000. This house is mortgaged. We have expenses, children to raise." "We anticipate that," Frank responded calmly, "which is why we have prepared several options for repayment. You could refinance the mortgage, establish a payment plan, or in the most extreme case, sell the property to satisfy the debt. We are open to reasonable arrangements that acknowledge the legitimacy of Mr. Bennett's claim." Thomas had gone pale, the implications sinking in. "You would force us to sell our home? After everything we have been through as a family?" The hurt and disappointment in his voice nearly broke my resolve, but I reminded myself of the weeks of isolation and disrespect I had endured. "I would prefer not to," I said, "but I will not allow my financial security to be compromised after being told I am meaningless to this family." "We never said you were meaningless to the family," Thomas protested. "Your exact words," I reminded him, "were that I have no meaning in this house anymore. You said I was neither needed nor particularly wanted." Those statements, combined with the systematic exclusion I have experienced, speak for themselves. From upstairs came the sound of footsteps. Jacob appeared at the top of the stairs, his expression troubled. "Dad? What is going on? Why is everyone yelling?" Amanda immediately switched to a falsely cheerful tone. "Everything is fine, honey. Adult discussion. Please go back to your room." Jacob hesitated, looking at me. I gave him a reassuring nod, and he reluctantly retreated. I turned back to Thomas and Amanda. I have no desire to create hardship for my grandchildren. My relationship with them is precious to me, and I intend to maintain it regardless of where I live. That said, I will not be treated as a burden or an inconvenience to be discarded when convenient. "So what happens now?" Thomas asked, his voice hollow. "Now, I finish moving to my new apartment. I have established a small consulting business using my construction management experience, which is already generating income. I have created a new social network and found a living situation that respects my independence and dignity." "And the money?" Amanda pressed. Frank answered, "We suggest you review the documentation and consult with your own attorney. We are prepared to file a civil suit if necessary, but would prefer to resolve this amicably." "I cannot believe you would sue your own son," Thomas said, shaking his head in disbelief. "And I could not believe my own son would tell me I have no meaning," I countered. Yet here we are. The conversation continued for another hour, cycling through anger, negotiation, and finally, a reluctant acceptance of reality. Thomas and Amanda realized the precariousness of their position, both legally and financially. The house they had purchased, partly with my contribution, was not just their home, but their largest asset. The prospect of losing it, or incurring substantial additional debt, was sobering. Eventually, we reached a preliminary agreement. They would consult with their own attorney and financial advisor, but tentatively agreed to a structured repayment plan that would allow them to keep the house while acknowledging their debt to me. Frank would draft the necessary documentation for review by all parties. As the discussion concluded, I stood to leave. I will gather the last of my belongings now. My new address and contact information are included in the envelope. I would like to maintain a relationship with Jacob and Lily, with regular visits and perhaps occasional weekends together. Thomas nodded stiffly, still processing the morning's revelations. Amanda remained silent, her expression unreadable. As I packed my final items, Jacob and Lily appeared at my door, their faces reflecting confusion and concern. "Are you really leaving, Grandpa?" Jacob asked. "Yes, buddy, I am. But I am not leaving you," I explained gently. "I have a new apartment not far from here. You and Lily can visit me there. I have a room just for you two, with books and games and space for sleepovers." "Why cannot you stay here with us?" Lily asked, tears welling in her eyes. I chose my words carefully, wanting to be honest without burdening them with adult conflicts. Sometimes grown-ups need their own spaces. Your mom and dad need their space, and now I need mine too. But love does not depend on living in the same house. I hugged them both tightly, promising to call them the very next day to arrange a visit to my new home. Their tearful goodbyes were the most painful part of the day, but I reminded myself that our relationship could actually improve without the constant tension that had pervaded the household. As I carried my last box to my car, several neighbors watched curiously from their yards. Word of my departure would spread quickly through the community. I held my head high, greeting those I passed with a friendly nod. There was no shame in standing up for oneself, in refusing to be diminished or devalued. Thomas came outside as I closed my trunk. For a moment, he looked like the boy I had raised, uncertain and seeking guidance. "Dad," he began, then faltered. "Yes?" I prompted gently. "I never meant for things to get to this point," he said finally. "It just happened gradually, and then suddenly we were here." "I know," I said, and I did. Family dynamics are complex, relationships evolve, and sometimes we find ourselves in places we never intended to go. We will figure out a new way forward. But it has to be based on mutual respect. He nodded, and for the first time in months, I saw a glimmer of the sun I had known. "For what it is worth, I am sorry." "That is worth quite a lot," I replied. "It is a place to start." With that, I got into my car and drove toward my new home, leaving behind a house where I had been deemed meaningless, but taking with me the dignity and self-determination that no one could take away. The first night in my Riverside Meadows apartment brought a profound sense of peace I had not experienced in months. The space, though modest compared to the family home I had shared with Gloria for decades, felt expansive in its freedom. Every item had been chosen with purpose. Every corner reflected my preferences, not compromises forced by others' expectations. I slept deeply that night, waking to sunlight filtering through blinds I had selected, in a room arranged exactly as I wanted. The simple pleasure of preparing coffee to my own taste, strong and black the way Gloria and I had always enjoyed it, became a small celebration of independence. That first week unfolded with a series of discoveries and connections. The community proved even more welcoming than anticipated. Margaret, my neighbor across the hall, invited me to join the weekly bridge game. David, a retired English professor, noticed the books I was unpacking and suggested a community book club that met in the common room. Carl and Judith, a couple who had moved in just a month before, invited me to their patio for grilled burgers and easy conversation about our shared experiences of starting over later in life. "It takes courage to reinvent yourself at our age," Judith commented as evening fell. "Most people just accept whatever situation they find themselves in, even if it makes them miserable." "I had a good teacher in that regard," I replied, thinking of Gloria, who had reinvented herself several times throughout our marriage, shifting careers and interests while maintaining her essential self. My late wife believed it was never too late to change course if the current path no longer served your well-being. My consulting business gained momentum rapidly. Word of mouth proved the most effective marketing, as satisfied clients referred their friends and neighbors. Martha Dennison, my first client, became something of an evangelist for my services after I saved her thousands of dollars by identifying serious structural issues her contractor had attempted to conceal. Hunter literally saved me from disaster, she told anyone who would listen. Without his expertise, I would have spent a fortune renovating a kitchen with faulty wiring and water damage beneath the floors. By the end of the first month, I had established a comfortable routine. Mornings began with coffee on my small balcony, watching the community garden come alive as early risers tended their plots. Mondays and Wednesdays, I conducted consultations with new clients. Tuesdays and Thursdays were reserved for on-site visits to ongoing renovation projects, where I served as the homeowner's advocate. Fridays I kept flexible for paperwork, unexpected client needs, or simply enjoying my new community. The weekends, however, belonged to Jacob and Lily. True to my promise, I called them the day after moving out to arrange their first visit to my new home. Thomas answered the phone, his voice still strained but making an effort toward civility. "They have been asking about you all day," he said. "Amanda and I thought perhaps they could visit Saturday morning. If that works for you?" That first visit established a pattern that would continue in the months ahead. Thomas or occasionally Amanda would drop the children at my apartment around 10 on Saturday morning. We would spend the day together, sometimes exploring the community amenities, other times venturing out to parks, museums, or other attractions. By late afternoon, they would return home, already looking forward to our next gathering. My relationship with my grandchildren, freed from the tension that had pervaded Thomas's house, actually deepened during this period. Without Amanda's constant oversight and limitations, we could interact naturally and build memories on our own terms. "I like your new house, Grandpa," Jacob declared during their second visit. "It feels happy here." "That is exactly right," I agreed, touched by his perceptive comment. "It is a happy place because I chose it for myself." My relationship with Thomas began a slow, cautious rebuilding. The legal and financial matters were resolved through a structured agreement. They would make monthly payments toward the debt, secured against the equity in their home. The terms were fair, acknowledging both the legitimacy of my claim and their financial constraints. With that business settled, we could begin addressing the emotional damage. Our first real conversation came about a month after my departure. Thomas had arrived alone to pick up the children after their Saturday visit. "Do you have time for coffee?" he asked hesitantly. We sat on my balcony, watching Jacob and Lily explore the community garden below with Margaret, who had taken a grandmotherly interest in them. "I have been doing a lot of thinking," Thomas began, "about what happened, how we got to that point." "I have been thinking about that too," I said. "Amanda and I." He paused, struggling for words. "We were wrong in how we treated you. I was wrong. I let her frustrations become my own without questioning whether they were justified. Family dynamics are complicated," I offered, neither absolving him nor condemning him. "I always thought I was nothing like Grandpa Bennett," he continued, referring to my father who had been a stern, unforgiving man. "But I became exactly like him in some ways, placing rules and control above relationship." We talked for over an hour, beginning the painful but necessary process of examining what had gone wrong and how we might forge a healthier relationship moving forward. Thomas acknowledged the influence Amanda had exercised over his perspective, without using it as an excuse for his own actions. "She has her own history with family disappointments," he explained. "But that does not justify how she treated you, or how I allowed it to continue." These conversations continued over the following months, sometimes productive, sometimes challenging, but always honest. Gradually, a new understanding emerged between us, based not on the old dynamic of parent and child, but on mutual respect between two adult men navigating a complicated family situation. Amanda remained more distant, civil but never warm. I accepted this limitation, focusing instead on maintaining access to my grandchildren and rebuilding trust with my son. Some relationships can be fully restored. Others must be managed with appropriate boundaries. Wisdom lies in recognizing the difference. My new life continued to expand in unexpected ways. 6 months after moving to Riverside Meadows, I was invited to teach a workshop on understanding home renovation for the community's continuing education program. The success of that initial class led to a regular series, expanding my business and connecting me with even more neighbors. 1 year after that painful dinner when Thomas had declared me meaningless, I hosted a gathering in the community room at Riverside Meadows. Jacob and Lily were there, as was Thomas, who had begun to visit occasionally on his own. Frank and his wife attended, along with Marjorie from Secure Futures. My new friends from the community filled out the group, creating a warm, lively atmosphere. As I looked around at these people who had supported me through one of the most challenging periods of my life, I felt a profound gratitude. The path had not been easy, but it had led to an authentic life of my own making. Later that evening, as the gathering wound down, Thomas approached me privately. "You seem really happy, Dad," he said, a note of wonder in his voice. "Happier than you were with us." "I am content," I acknowledged. "Not because I left your home, but because I reclaimed my sense of purpose and worth." "I wish I had understood sooner," he said, "before things went so far." "We cannot change the past," I told him, "but we can learn from it. That is the best any of us can do." And learn we did. The painful rupture in our family forced us all to examine our assumptions about aging, family obligations, and personal dignity. For Thomas, it meant recognizing that respect must be the foundation of any relationship, regardless of age or circumstance. For me, it meant understanding that self-advocacy is not selfish, but necessary for genuine connection. The journey from that crushing moment of being told I had no meaning to creating a meaningful life on my own terms taught me lessons I now share with others facing similar challenges. Never allow anyone to define your worth. Age brings wisdom and perspective, not irrelevance. Financial independence provides options that emotional dependence may compromise. And perhaps most importantly, it is never too late to begin again. 2 years after moving out, my consulting business had grown into a respected resource for homeowners throughout the community. My apartment had become a true home, filled with new memories alongside treasured reminders of Gloria and our life together. My relationship with Thomas continued to heal, while Jacob and Lily flourished in the stability of knowing their grandfather remained a constant presence in their lives. The man who had been deemed meaningless had created meaning through action, resilience, and self-respect. The silent plan had led to a vocal, vibrant life. What boundaries have you had to establish in your own family relationships? How did you balance self-respect with family connections? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Please like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need encouragement to stand up for their dignity. Thank you for joining me on this journey of healing and rediscovery. Remember, it is never too late to write a new chapter in your life story.